that go along with entrepreneurship. So I could not go without having an amazing guest come on here and talk to you about contracts, because even as a HoneyBook pro and expert, I often hear people not being well informed about why they should be using contracts and how to truly protect their business. So thank you so very much, Shireen, for being a yes.
You are very welcome. And I'm going to try and make contracts sexy. So,
Well, hey, whatever can help people start using them. Like, we need them in every facet of our business. So I appreciate that. And I met Shireen at a networking event that we have. You know, a lot of y'all meet people at some great networking events, and I often talk to y'all about on this channel why networking can be a useful way for you to not only go in there just to think that, oh, I'm going to get a client, but you may be able to find people that you are able to collaborate with inside of your business, to be able to either provide better services to your clients or cool things like this as an interview to help with educating your audience. So Shireen, tell people a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump right into this conversation.
yeah, so my name is Shireen Eldemary. I am a lawyer in Dallas, Texas. I am with a firm called Fulton Jong. We are a full service business law firm. Many of us are also entrepreneurs, so we have our own business and really understand the struggle of being an entrepreneur and starting your own business. And then we're all very experienced. I've practiced law for a long time. I've seen a lot in my career, and so can guide you through those pitfalls. And I did do a lot of cases before transitioning to the more proactive side relating to contracts. And we'll talk about how things can go wrong either without one or even if you have one without the right terms.
I love it. And I love the fact that you said proactive approach, because I don't think that people understand that you can have a reactive way of law, and then you can also have a proactive way to protecting your business. So when you say a proactive approach to contracts, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is investing in getting your legal foundations right early on. So even if you're just starting out, it is worth it to invest some time in talking with a business lawyer. You know, I know you've talked about some other topics about entity and some other things, and we'll touch on some of that with regard to how to make sure you set that up with a contract.
Mhm.
But proactive means that you are ready, you've gone through it, you have what you need so that when things go south, because, you know, I know we all want to be optimists and like this relationship's going to be great, but things happen.
Yeah.
And if you haven't defined the relationship, it can go south really quickly. And then you're calling a lawyer in reactive mode. And that is, I mean, I can tell you it's 10 to 100 times more. So if you want to lose all the money that you make, don't
Yeah.
have a contract. If you
Yeah.
would like to retain some of it, you know, you should have a contract. And at the end of the day, some of these disputes are business decisions,
Yeah.
but having a contract will put you in a much better position.
And I find that sometimes when, we're newer in business, and we're having word conversations with people, and we have the best of intentions, and we're not aware of why it's important for us to have proof of conversation, proof of agreement, and things of that, because we don't think that certain people will either do wrong by us, or we just don't know that things can happen, and just kind of naively think that I don't need to have that. Or they're like, oh, it's family that's helping me right now. So then I won't have to worry about any of these things, because I may need help, but my sister in law is going to help me do X, Y, and Z, or my husband or my uncle said he's going to invest some money behind what I'm doing. So I don't need to really worry about those, because these are word agreements with individuals. So what would you say are some of the main contracts that business owners should think about if they are newer in business? Let's say under 3 years.
Yes. So if you, what I would say is we understand, right?
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are bootstrapping. There are, you know, different things out there that might give you some protection, but if you don't really understand what should be in a contract, that's not going to be helpful to you. So the types of things that I would talk about, like for example, if you're going into business with a partner, you definitely need a document that outlines your relationship. So if it's an LLC, that's normally called an operating agreement. So basically outlines all the roles and responsibilities. And of course, if things change or you want to bring a new partner on or somebody wants to leave, all that information will be in there. I work with a lot of small businesses on the service provider side. So
Mhm.
definitely having a contract. And I know, I've had some small businesses that are like, well, I have an invoice. And while it's true that provides some of the basis of a contract. So, if you want me to get legal, the
Mhm.
components of a contract are offer, acceptance, consideration.
Mhm.
Normally, an invoice covers that, right? I'm offering my services, you accept them, this is the price you're going to pay, and this is the time I'm going to give you, right? So you have that piece, but there's a lot of other stuff you don't have in there. You don't have confidentiality requirements. You don't have, if you're doing events, you don't have any provisions for insurance requirements, or what are the requirements of the use of the space, right? Do you want people to be able to bring food in there or not? I had a client that was a recording studio, and I was like, there will be no food or drinks in this studio because you don't want your equipment to get damaged, right?
Mhm.
Cancellation policies. This is where I think this is a big piece for some of these smaller businesses, is that you don't communicate a cancellation or refund policy. So when somebody's upset, they're just going to terminate, and you may not have any recourse for that.
Yeah.
And then, something that's really been on my mind lately, there is a very technical term for this, Latin or French force majeure. But if you think about our friends in the Southeast US right now who
Yeah.
are reeling from the hurricanes, a lot of those folks are not going to be able to perform on their contracts, right? I mean,
Yeah.
some places infrastructure's wiped out,
Yes.
right? Flooding. So if they had product or whatever, they don't have it anymore, and they need to be able to walk away. And so
Yeah.
if you don't have that in the contract, it's a little bit harder versus this is a natural disaster. Like we just need, I'm not going to be able to recover in 5 days and give you what I need. We just need to walk away. And maybe next year you can come back to me and my business will be back on the ground. But you need to think about, things like that. So you're going to have a lot of businesses that don't have that. I mean, you have to hope in the humanity of people that they're going to be okay, but not everybody is.
Yeah.
And you need to think through those things. So termination, like it's going to happen, so you want to know like how far in advance do they have to tell you that they're going to
Yeah.
terminate, because that'll give you time to find a new customer,
Yeah.
right? Or if you get to have some time to fix it, and then of course, depending on what you want to do, I have my whole list here, like your dispute resolution, your, if you want to limit the liability, where they're going to be able to bring cases against you.
Yeah.
And we'll get into online businesses as well, but those are some really key things that an invoice usually will not have. So you have not defined the whole relationship, and you haven't provided steps for how, when things don't go the way they're supposed to, how to end the relationship in a way that is less painful.
Yeah. And I love the fact that, and I think when we think of contracts, and specifically a lot of people that watch this channel, they are in the event vein of business. One thing that we had to really learn and adapt to is the pandemic. We're only 4 years out of this, like, however, people haven't realized the importance of protecting your business. Like, people were in positions where they didn't have any clauses or anything like that. And here this happens, and now there's this shutdown where people don't know when it was going to be, some of the restrictions are going to be lifted. And because of that, now you may have people doing chargebacks because you did not have anything that was properly being communicated. Where, like with me, I have proper communication inside of my contract about those types of things. So even if something happens at one of my clients that is out of my control, and it's 7 days out, and they're like, hey, we don't think we can do this, I have in there, this is what our terms are. And, like, you can't just say 5 days before we want to cancel this event. No, we're holding on to your money. You can use a portion of it towards something different. But for us, if I had to say no to opportunities
Right.
because I thought that I was working or my team member was going to be working, I am not going to just take the loss of income because I did not have the proper communication that's there. And this is why I feel like contracts as well as insurance are those things that you hope that you never need to use.
Right.
However, you're grateful when they are there.
You are grateful when they're there, and you can outline kind of how that process is going to work, right? So I usually recommend when I talk about dispute resolution, you do not have to file a lawsuit immediately, right? You
Hmm.
can put in your contract like we have to have good faith negotiations for 10 days. And if
Yes.
that doesn't work, I normally recommend, especially for smaller businesses, doing a mediation with a third party, right? It's going to be way less expensive,
Yeah.
and you're probably going to come away with an agreement to just terminate the deal. And then you can decide, you can also outline in there that if neither one of those work, then we'll either do arbitration or litigation. And the piece that I want to talk to you about litigation is you should have in your contracts the choice of law and venue, right? So I'm in Dallas, Texas. I want my contracts to say choice of law is Texas because I know what the law is and my lawyers know what the law is, right? And I want it in my backyard. I do
Yeah.
not want you suing me in the Rio Grande Valley, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to go down there.
Yeah.
Depending on what type of business you do, like you may have to do it where the event or where like real estate or certain things are located.
Yeah.
But for the most part, in commercial contracts, the companies get to decide
Yeah.
where that is. I mean, there are a few consumer protection situations where you might not have that, but generally, if your contract says it and they signed it, then that's what governs.
Yeah.
And that can change the expense of a dispute by a lot, right? If you don't have to travel, that
Yes.
lowers the expense, right? If you don't have to hire another lawyer because you'll have your lawyer here in Texas,
Yeah.
and you have to hire another lawyer if it's in another state or even another city, right? Because courts are very hometown, so you
Yes.
want somebody who has been in there, right? So those are things to think about that I don't think anybody really considers what the cost savings are when you outline what law applies and where they can actually bring actions against you.
So, with you saying that, for those of us that operate in multiple cities and states, or I don't want to say cities, let's in multiple states, should we have different contracts for the different states we operate, or just one that um, like if we're doing services, so for like let's say myself, my company, we do events for apartment complexes in different cities and states. I have my main one that covers all of our services, and I have that Texas is the law of which. Would it make sense to have one for each state, or is it still the best option to just focus on the state that our business is set up and federated out of?
Yeah, no, I've worked for large corporations. Normally, we get to dictate, right? It could be a point of negotiation, right? It depends on who your party is on the other side. They might want to negotiate that. And there's some considerations on where you might want to have disputes, like where are all the witnesses going to be?
Mm,
What kind of jurisdiction is it, right? Normally, for larger businesses, we consider like Delaware, New York, and
yeah,
for Texas, Dallas
yeah,
or Houston. Well, Dallas has had a lot more business cases. So I usually am like, you want people in locations that have had business law experience and understand where we're going. Texas is moving to a business court situation, so we're going to actually have courts similar to Delaware that deal with specifically business matters, which will
yeah,
be somewhat helpful. But still, most large corporations will try to put in their choice of law where their headquarters are,
mhm,
or a business friendly jurisdiction. But again, it could be a point of negotiation, and it really just depends on your bargaining power with the other party, um, of where that should be. But just knowing where it is a huge benefit to you, because once you know that, you can start making your connections and determining, do I need to ask my local lawyer if they know somebody in that town in
yeah,
case this goes south, right? So that you
yeah,
can already start being proactive if that becomes an issue of negotiation, and that you have to give up what you would prefer for
yeah,
your customer or client in order to get the deal done. And, at the end of the day, it's a business decision, but
Yeah.
it's one to think about and to understand what those cost savings could be.
And from when I've been up north, I do find that a lot of companies lean into the Delaware side of things. So I was like, oh, that makes a ton of sense because of where people, how close everything is and or condensed in that part of the world and the tax benefits and all that kind of stuff that people
Right.
lean into Delaware. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask is what are the most common legal issues that small businesses face? And how can they prevent them?
So, I mean, I'll tell you a couple of my, war stories, right? So, for example, having the invoice and no contract, right? You can be sued anywhere. This actually happened to me. I had a small business. They primarily did business in Australia and New Zealand. Their
Mm,
U.S. business base was Oregon. Okay,
mm,
so that's where their business location was listed in the United States. They were physically in Hawaii. They got sued in Denton, Texas. Okay, so they're not here, right? They don't do business here, really. They had, a contract with a contractor who was located in Denton. By the
okay.
time they found out about the lawsuit, just because their business, suite uh, did not forward them the complaint because it was personally delivered, it was going to be a default judgment. So I normally don't go into the courtroom, but by the time they found out about it, it was like 3 days till a default
Okay.
judgment was going to be entered. And I was like, I will show up for you.
Yeah.
But if this becomes a whole trial, like I need to, I need to find somebody
Right.
who does this all the time and does it in Denton, right?
Yeah.
So, and that obviously cost them a couple of extra $1,000 that they didn't need to spend had they had a contract that outlined one the relationship. There was a whole
Thing.
other issue there
Yeah.
than having to deal with the venue issue, but that was a big one, right?
Yeah.
And so they also had no information about what happens when people breach, right? So both
Mm,
parties didn't feel like either one did the right thing,
yeah.
but you have to make a business decision like how much of a nuisance is this going to be for this person to keep pestering me or keep suing me in a city that I'm not at where I
Yeah.
keep having to hire counsel.
Yeah.
Um, and then just what we were talking about, some of the stuff with the new not having the right provisions, right? Sometimes I deal with a lot of companies that, you provide a service, you want to limit your liability, right? So
Hmm.
sometimes you want to say, well, I really don't want to be sued for more than what I've been paid.
Hmm.
So it's a negotiation point, one times, two times, depending on what, the issue is, but you want to know what the cap of the damages are if everything goes really bad.
Yeah.
um, no refund policy. I have a lot of smaller businesses that are like, and I'm like, well, if you didn't communicate it and they're
Hmm.
going to do chargebacks, like that's just how it is. No insurance requirements in event space. Like this is a major problem, right? Because
Yes.
whose insurance um, will cover if there's an accident or something on the premises.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, like then you are going to be liable and have to pay for all of the damages.
Yeah.
Um, so those are some of the things that I can think of off the top of my head that cause some issues. On the other side, where I do spend a lot of my time for online businesses. So when
Hmm.
if you're an online business, your terms of use on your website is a contract. Like it tells people how you interact and what your expectation is of them and that they agree to those terms. And then we have a lot of stuff going on depending on what states you're in and how big you are with regard to what you're doing with consumers data, right? So you
Hmm.
have to
Yeah.
give notice, and this is really more for the regulator side because the customers may not have a private right of action, but the regulators might be coming after you for
Yeah.
not providing notice or not following the laws with regard to what you can and cannot do with information that customers give to you. So those are really big ones if you're on the online space to make sure that you have those policies on your website. And
Yeah.
yes, the terms of use usually will say it's a contract between you and the visitor to your website.
And one of the while I was listening to you, it also reminded me I was at a small business summit months ago, and there was someone that has a PPG brand, and him and his brother started this business together. Well, he started it, but then his brother kind of like invested in it. And the dynamic was he was the younger brother and the older brother, and so he was always used to bullying him around and blah blah blah, and he wasn't responsible. And the younger brothers had more success in the region that he was covering, while the other brother was trying to grow it in another region, and was legitimately kind of ciphering money off of him.
Mhm.
So, but because it's his brother, they didn't do any of those things. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, but I get too that often, maybe because I've been in business so long, that I understand that it's better to have something in writing. Even if I'm doing a phone call with someone, I'm infamous for, like, after that phone call, emailing. It was a great talk to you. We discussed A, B, and C. These are the things in which I have agreed to. And this is what, even if it's a complaint, like, I'm really big on, if a client has a complaint in my business, it doesn't happen often. However, when something does occur, I always make sure I do a rebuttal email that reiterates what we discussed, the things and solutions in which we're going to provide, and what actions we're going to be doing internally to correct that behavior. It's great communication. However, it's also so that if there's ever anything that they can't say that I did not say X, Y, and Z, or I agreed to a certain term that I never agreed to. And it's, yes, you hope that, it's always great to have the hope that people will not try to get over on you. But
Yeah.
if people are willing to or accidentally pour some coffee on themselves that they get from McDonald's to prove that it's hot, they're willing to do those types of things for smaller businesses, because
Right.
honestly, if we're not, some people have this idea that we're not protecting ourselves. So if you're going to have bad intentions, they're going to be the easier target, because I can complain, I can make enough noises, I can go into your Yelp and do all these different things. And then I can even go straight to your payment processor, depending on how organized someone is when it comes to how they receive payments.
Right.
And like PayPal, I always tell people, like, PayPal is great for consumers. However, they're not for companies. So if you're using a platform that is similar to a PayPal, and you don't have any contracts or any communication, and you charge someone $5,000 or $10,000, and you don't have anything to protect your business, PayPal will take that money right up out of your bank account and say, sorry, there's nothing I can do. And now you have to essentially absorb that loss of whatever that money is, because you haven't taken the time to protect your business with the things in which you need inside of your company.
Yeah, I would say, when you're dealing with these third party service providers, you do want to look at those terms, but you also, a lot of them do require certain policies and procedures. So if they don't know what was communicated to your customers, or they don't see what your policy is, they can't enforce it on
Yeah.
your behalf.
Hmm.
They have some other regulations that they have to deal with. So, and there's always going to be customers that are um, a big nuisance,
Yes.
and potentially, standing your ground on your contract versus paying a nuisance fee.
Yeah.
That's a business decision. It's like,
Yeah.
you don't want to necessarily set a precedent that you don't abide by your contracts, but there are some instances where, my advice could be, is it really worth it? Because they're going to sue us, and this is how much it's going to cost to go through litigation. You probably will be right, right? And so if
Yeah.
you're a person of principle and you have the funds, then go for it. But a lot of times you're going to have to cut some sort of deal. And you're right with your third party service providers. If a lot of them do require certain types of policies in order for them to be able to take your side of the story and
100%.
protect yourself. And I will say, for folks who, family is family. I mean, we all know that what that is, but there are rules and regulations about investments and loans, right? So if it's a loan, there should be some sort of writing that
Yeah.
it's a loan. If it's an investment in your business, I mean, it can be regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, and you have to have certain documentation for that
Yeah.
to keep yourself out of trouble, right? So what I would say to folks who are like, I don't want to be that formal. I do get that a lot with small businesses. Like, oh my God, you gave me a contract with 10 paragraphs. And I'm like, yes, you can change one and two, like what your services are. If you alter the rest of these, you've just eliminated all the protections I've given you. People are used to seeing contracts, right?
Yeah.
Like we do it every day, and sometimes you don't read them,
Yeah.
but it's like, do you really like notice that there's 15 paragraphs versus 10? Not until there's a problem. And
Yeah.
when there's a problem, you better want all 15 of those that are in there for you to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Um, if you're on the other side, you want to negotiate those, but that's for another day. But friends and family, one way to kind of buffer that communication, especially when we're talking about investments, is like, listen, I want to do this on the up and up. I understand there's some state laws or federal laws that relate to investments.
Mhm.
We have to have certain documentation
Yeah.
in place. I mean, will it work? I don't know. And family relationships are tricky as it is.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but the same thing with friends. I mean, there literally is a type of investment called friends and family raises, and it actually requires um, a lot of documentation to protect yourself from your Securities Exchange Commission or your state securities regulator. So just to be mindful of that it is really important in that instance to have written documentation.
Perfect. And that kind of leads right into the next question that I have is, can you explain the difference between a contract and a memorandum of understanding, and when should businesses use each?
So usually memorandums of understanding is in the pre phase, right? So you're also going to want, depending on what type of business you have, you'll probably want what we call a non-disclosure agreement, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to talk to you about my business, kind of what I do, but you have obligations not to share that publicly because we're trying to figure out if we want to do a deal together. And so you kind of outline what that deal might look like, and then you guys have further meetings to decide if you actually want to go forward. So it's kind of more like a guideline, like, yes, if what I find out from spending these 3 meetings with you or looking at whatever documents I need to look at or understanding the product more or the service, that I will enter into this contract. That's what a memorandum of understanding is. It does not have really much more than that. And then
Okay.
you'll want to pair it with a non-disclosure agreement, which is basically a contract that they won't disclose, proprietary information about your business.
Yeah.
So once you guys agree, once you go through that, because there's sometimes a song and dance that you're going to do with businesses, and you want to find out, are we the right fit? Once you decide that yes, we're going to go forward with this, that's when you want to put your contract in that really outlines everything else. Because then all you have is a potential understanding. You might have what I would call the invoice level, right? This
Yeah.
much. Yeah, I'm going to give you this service for this price, deliver on this date, and that's it. So I would really recommend that if you enter into memorandums of understanding, that needs to be followed up with a full contract if you guys decide to move forward with the agreement.
And when would you recommend for someone to do a non-disclosure? I have people sign those with me all the time in my business, but when would you recommend for someone to, or when and how would you recommend for someone to use a non-disclosure?
Um, Early and often, right? So if you know that you're going to be giving them proprietary information, so like more than what's on your website, more than like what they could figure out publicly,
Yeah.
that's the point in time that you want to have a non-disclosure agreement. If they're going to get the ins and outs of how your business works, or something special about what it is that you do that you can't glean out of the materials that you give out publicly for people to find your business, or have been to events, something different than that. So think about pricing, how you structure pricing,
Mhm.
who some of your key folks that you utilize or your subcontractors. You don't want anybody to know what those agreements are that you have with them. So anything where potentially some of that information can come out and that could be used, right? So they're looking for bids, right? You don't want them to know potentially what your markup is with your subs versus you, right? You
Yeah.
want to be like, this is what I'm giving you. Um, but if for some reason some document gets out which shows them that they cannot use that for their own benefit, right?
Mhm.
That was confidential information. So you're going to want to do it fairly early if you know you're giving information out that's not public. Even pricing, even custom pricing, you might want to have non-disclosure around because you don't want them talking to other clients because you know there's a reason why you're giving different pricing for different clients or different events.
And so, and I'm glad you gave that. And I think that that was very clear for the explanation. But I can also see how some people maybe like, I have a team member, what are, or I have contractors that I'm working with. What would be some types of contracts or agreements that would be beneficial when you either have team members or contractors working for or with you?
Yeah, so that's a great. I do get that question a lot. Like, oh, do I give them a non-disclosure? I'm like, if you have a contract, the confidentiality provision should be in there, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm hiring subcontractors, I should have a contract in place that they sign. It'll have what we call the confidentiality clause. So it basically subsumes the non-disclosure agreement. A non-disclosure agreement is before you guys actually have a contract, right? You're in that negotiation, that memorandum of understanding, like trying to figure out, do we want to do this or not?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then once you decide, yes, I want to do this, you're going to transfer over to a full contract and the confidentiality provisions will go in there. If you are a business
And I think your audio went down because I can't hear you, just so you know. Hold on. Say something because I want to see if your mic moves. Hold on. Sorry about this, everybody. This happens in live interviews.
Okay, I'm back. Can you
All
hear
right.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear?
Sorry about that.
It happens. This is live.
Yeah.
It's fine. it's, it's a live
So
interview.
I don't know where I don't know where I cut off, but basically non-disclosure agreements are pre actually deciding to do business with each other.
Okay.
Once you decide to do business, you'll have a contract. You'll bring in confidentiality provisions into
Yeah.
the contract. You should have contracts with subcontractors. Anybody who is 1099s, you should have a contract with.
Yes.
Employees, that would be in your employee handbook, and you should have employees sign a confidentiality
Yeah.
document.
Yeah.
But that relationship is a little bit more governed by policies and procedures than a contract.
Yeah, because even for myself, and so for any of you that are in the event vein, because I have several videos, and I actually will make sure I link that here on why to use vendor relationships to help with growing and scaling. However, when you're having these relationships, there needs to be some terms. So whenever I have someone that I'm bringing on new inside of my team, I have a whole onboarding packet that I put inside of HoneyBook where I'm asking, I have a communication on arrival, dress code, the non-disclose, like non-compete. Like I have all the things that I need to have to protect. And most of those situations have been because I realize, and the importance to me to doing this in the beginning is that people don't all have the same thoughts and like thoughts and concepts on arrival or communication or dress or professionalism. So I learned that I rather